So this section is really talking about like that second view of adulthood in entering adulthood on page 436, where it's the view of adults adjusting to environmental pressures and post-formal thought. There goes on in these sections of a lot of ideas. Um, it covers like strict dualism, multiplicity, early multiplicity, late multiplicity. So what this is really talking about is like that change that we go through when we make decisions, how we put our values in it, um, uh, who has authority, or who do we feel has authority to honor their authority or not. When you're an adolescent, you know that that's your parents, and you know that they're telling you something, but there's like this idea of define authority, and that kind of changes to where right versus wrong, and what authorities are truthful really starts to change as we enter adulthood. And so on page 440 there is a quick sheet that you can review from that to kind of see like the differences in that. And so that might be something that you want to just review this section. It's a couple of pages, or just overview this graph here that gives it all to you. Basically, it is the ability to notice how your brain changes and how it looks at things and how it sees things different. And maybe you could kind of talk about that in your paper of remembering something specifically that may have happened in those areas. So I'm not going to go over all that, but it really just covers, the rest of the chapter just really covers a lot about the judgment and how we see things differently as we actually start reaching and emerging into adulthood, each of us. And then I'm going to skip over to page 450. And this really just kind of talks about, so this is good as far as counselors go. It's good as reflective, and it's good if you're current parents. It really talks about how overparenting can be a burden to your children in some ways, like lower well-being, having a lot of anxiety, trouble communicating, higher depression, lower life satisfaction. And so it gives you some sources here if you want to read more about those type of things, to where like what's the effects of a helicopter parent. um, and It goes on page 452 talking about the conceptualizations of stages in counselor development, and how those are very similar to emerging adult, which is the first one is self and other awareness, getting motivation, autonomy, um, and how that increases over time with experience, just like as we learn as our own skill sets. That's kind of a good analogy for how emerging adults have to take on those things and increase them for themselves. Making decisions is a very hard challenge for this age group, and that's why you'll often get people that are very anxious about making the wrong decision. They're fearful of that. Um, and so anything that you use in this book that you find interesting, I'd love to see that kind of feedback in your papers. Especially as you go over into the socio-emotional and vocational development of young adults, which is chapter 12. And this is where it's going to talk about attachment and love, nuclear family, which a lot of people don't have at this point anymore. Um, there's attachment styles that we need to know. Our relationships, whether they're friends or love, become different, and those avoidant, anxious, secure attachments really start showing through even more in adulthood. And it also allows us to start processing those attachments that we had with our families as we were going through our adolescent years. And as a clinician, I can tell you that the link or connection between how we had a relationship with our family and our partner selection and our satisfaction with our intimate partners are very much connected for most people, and that's what a lot of therapy sessions are about. Recognizing that, trying to break chains, break bad habits. That's not really the word I would use, but just trying to identify to not make the same wrongs consistently. When it comes to work, there's a lot of career development that goes into a specialized field. Some of us will do that a little bit just in generalized therapy, and some of us will do that as a career. A lot of your school counselors will work with seniors on this type of thing, or juniors. But the things that we're most familiar with from career counseling is like Holland's personality types, Super's developmental approach. So this is a refresher on some of that stuff if you feel like you want to read through some of that. Going to college or having a trade seems to be more popularized now than it did decades ago. You see a lot of non-traditional students coming back into the school system because they want the education system, I'm sorry. Because there was a time where college was for everybody, but everybody couldn't go to college, and it talks about the forgotten half. Um, Now there is still a push for college, but how does that look different? And how did that look different for you? And what was the factors and the age group that you were in when college became a reality for you? I think those things is things you want to explore in your paper. And this section just gives you some information to process. It also gives you some different things about STEM, science, math, how that has really become a push for to include and encourage more females in that section. And work and development self-concept. So we're getting to the industry section of Erikson, and so you're going to have to, so if you're specifically looking for stuff under Erikson on page 491, it goes over that for you, so that might be helpful when you write your paper. I know I'm going through this kind of fast, but you're going to be skimming over it for yourself to write your paper, so I'm not going to sit here and read it line by line. I'm just trying to hit some highlights to tell you where some things are. I know that everybody is going to be having to really push and work on their finalized assignments, so I wanted to try to wrap these 5 chapters up as quickly as I could so that you would know where things are, but it would not be hours and hours and hours of lecture. It also talks about attachment applied to couples and family, 497, if you want to read that for yourself for your paper, or even if you're more interested in providing that type of services. Couples counseling is extremely a hard service to do. So I do provide that, and if there's anybody that wants to talk more about that, please let me know. And that takes us into chapter 13, middle adulthood, cognitive personality, and social development. You know, this is the time where a lot of people become closer to their parents because now they have children and families, and family kind of circles back around as a more important connection for them. This is also when people start having a lot of losses in their life. You know, it's your middle adulthood. On page 508, it gives you some characteristics and traits like extroversion, agreeableness, conscientiousness, openness to experiences. And this is really talking about that way that we all have different personalities, and whether or not that how we deal with change. It's the 5-factor or the big 5 model of personalities. So those are definitely something that you want to like not be just knowledgeable of, but also knowledgeable of yourself about. So that's a good section to read. And then you have social maturity, and that really has a lot to do with those big 5s. And then it talks about temperament, and you know, anybody that's been in the world, we all know that temperament is different for each person. Um, and how we deal with change, how we deal with unknowns, how we deal with things being up in the air, uh, sudden changes versus just our plans not going through. Those are really things that we have to deal with individually, and it has a whole lot to do with our own personality traits. Then it goes on page 513, frequency of sexual activity by gender and age. So that gives you kind of an idea of the national average. Which, if you're doing couples counseling, that'll be important, but also just individually, that may be something you personally want to know, or it may also be something that you just would maybe be able to tell people when they talk about their sex life, so you kind of know what the average is, if that's kind of in the range or not. Cognitive changes in adulthood is our intelligence, our executive functioning part of our intelligence is really like got so much experience scaffolded into it that our problem solving skills are well developed by this stage. Our crystallized intelligence of our skills, our abilities to just do things. There is a slowing down of the ability to learn new things, but not impossible. We need to always know that. Um, some of the biggest changes that happen throughout this section is it talks about on page 516 is we are fully matured by that phase. We've built a career. We've kind of know more what's important to us. A lot of our life tasks have unfolded. Um, how we see ourselves, like accepting of ourselves usually increases. Like we've lived with the things that we are not the most proud of physically, or those type of things. We've worked around, we've kind of seen more value in who we are. um, and on page 518, it gives you like a another quick overview of Erikson's stages. And so it talks about the middle midlife is finding the courage and the resourcefulness to act on deeper feelings, awareness, and pressure of time. So there's that realization, because you are experiencing losses more than most people experience in previous stages. But there's also a value to life that you have, and it's kind of like some people make major changes during this time because they recognize the life changes. Some people put more time into things that they have become more valuable, that may not be associated so much with their career at this point. Um, oops, I skipped a page. Then it goes on page 520. It talks about some health concerns, things that we have to do health wise that may be a little bit different, changes in our relationships and marriages. And then on page 524, this chapter always goes into like something that gives you more specific areas. So if you're interested in how families have changed with the LGBT population and adoption and those type of things, there's a section there that you can go through and read. And it gives you a family life cycle on page 528, about your children leaving home, having the empty nest, having larger families, not home every day because your kids have left, but maybe now you have grandchildren, and how that experiences empty nesters of having to reconnect without children being there. Definitely impacts a marriage. or relationship, and it gives you some information about some people don't keep that connection at all, and so after empty nest happens, there's often a divorce, but there's also often a found relationship that they don't have to consider children anymore in their relationship. You get a small section there about relationships and experiencing making a mark, kind of like your legacy, what you left behind, work and community involvement, leadership. And so that kind of wraps up chapter 13. The last thing there is page 544. What do we know from years of research on couple relationships? So again, there's a lot in this section about relationships. And so it talks about how people are defining a relationship. How do they operate? What does each partner bring to a relationship? And what are some factors that influence relationships? So these are really good things to kind of process on your own if they're relevant to you, but it's also a really good outline when you are working with couples. So these are the kind of things, when you look at these little graphs, I think they're really good if you can screenshot them or however to save those, because they're always just a really good resource. And then the chapter ends on like how some things become diagnostic features like PTSD and treatment of PTSD and different things depending on a person's experiences. And that takes us into chapter 14. Chapter 14 really focuses on wellness. So I think this is a chapter that is absolutely most important for you to read and explore how wellness impacts you. You know, do you have the coping skills that you need? As clinicians, that's what we do, is we help people develop coping skills. So how we handle stress, how stress affects us, how well we cope, all leads to our happiness and wellness in our life. And that's really the whole thing about chapter 14. And so this is a really important chapter. So if you were going to read any chapters in this section, this would be the one that I would say read this one, because this one, no matter where you are, deadlines of women, especially with COVID, we have seen how much isolation, stress is impacting people. People are learning more about their own wellness than they ever have. And this is not something that is just for our clients, just for everybody. As clinicians, we are the worst at taking care of ourselves. We are. And that's why our profession has such a high rate of burnout. So whether it's spirituality, your religious, your family connections, your relationships, your good coping, lack of coping, how you went through your midlife, or how you want to go through your midlife if you're not in that yet, I think is an incredibly important part of your paper of assessing your wellness. And so we're not talking about BMI, we're talking about your level of being well and happy. So really take some time to look at how you deal with stress, how you've been able to grow through this period, and how you've been able to handle those life stressors, and maybe some changes that you would like to implement for wellness if you're not where you want to be. Because this is going to be, that connection between body and mind is going to be a major part of the services that you provide. There's a lot of information in this section. So like I said, just take time to read it. Meditation, relaxation, those type of things are getting more and more popular. And I don't see it as a trend. I see it as like it has to happen. And that leads us to chapter 15. So I think we'll be able to get all these in about 30 minutes with the 2 videos. I think that we learned a whole lot about the gains and losses in later adulthood because of the cradle to the grave. And I didn't want to put that big of a video on you on the end. So a lot of this stuff you kind of already got from the video. I'm going to scan through here and see. I think personally dealing with like dementia versus dealing with a family member dealing with dementia versus dealing with clients or clients' families who are experiencing dementia, I think that those are really things that you have to really process of how you feel about the geriatric population, and your own culture and values around providing care to that population, being cared for as a person that will eventually get older. Um, this is a really difficult population to work with in some ways. Um, and with the baby boomers reaching this complete geriatric age, this is a big population right now. So really explore this chapter for yourself and see how you feel about those type of retirement homes, nursing homes. When even like, for example, one of the hardest things you got to think about is like the substance abuse issue. How do you work with someone that is in their end of life stage for sobriety of pain medication for true pain management? So those are type of things that you really want to figure out for yourself. If you're not here, you want to really think about this stage when you're working with this population, of how you feel about it, your values about it, how you see it. So in your paper requirements, we talked about if you're not in a stage, explore someone that is, or explore how you want to see yourself in it. So this is a really good chance, if you're not here, to think about how your culture, age, your perception, your values are going to play a role in your late adulthood. And even, if you're comfortable with it, even exploring like the death, death and um, dying concerns that all of us have to live with, our lack of immortality. Um, you know, um, I remember in college once I had an assignment. I don't know if you all ever had one of those where you had to write your own obituary, and how like kind of morbid that kind of felt. Um, or plan your own funeral. Like, just those kind of things are kind of difficult to have to think about, and think about all the people that would impact. Um, the other thing that I think I would process if I was doing this paper and if I was in your position, is how you feel about some of the like assisted dying rules. So different states have, um, rules and regulations, and as a counselor, someone wanting to end their life on their own terms because of the specific terminal illness that they have, what are your thoughts about those kind of things? Those are hard things to process for some of us. On page 626, there is a therapeutical application, and again, I love this author of these texts because I love these kind of things. It really gives you like, hey, these are some specific therapies. These are the outcomes that these will give, and these are some that you can specifically do with this population for specific needs. And so those are just really good. So like an example, cognitive behavior uh, is changing dysfunctional thoughts, active problem solving. For older adults, understanding older adults' client learning styles, recognizing sensory impairments that might interfere with learning, uses of concrete written material and practice. So giving them something that's visual because they might not have recall. So it gives you like the adaptations that help with this population. Okay. And so that leaves us to the end. Thank you guys for hanging in there with me. I look forward to reading your papers. And if you have any questions about anything, please let me know. Thank you.